Johns lives, and they came to me and asked me to be on the fire department. And I knew nothing about fighting fires, had no interest in it. But I trained horses. I was out in the community all the time, and they needed somebody to drive a fire truck, and I happened to have a license to drive a fire truck because I had the license to drive a big truck with my horses. And so I did that, and I went to my first fire and realized that they didn't know what they were doing, and somebody was going to get killed. And so at that point, I said, I've got the money. I can go to fire academy. I can work one day, be off two. I can still piddle with my horses, trade around on horses, and have a good income and have health insurance. So I did that. I was in EMT school and got a job at the funeral home in Tyler that was supposed to be for 2 weeks. You know, I was just going to go see about it because I'd already been on wrecks at that point as a fireman, and I didn't want anything to do with dead bodies. Nothing. Terrified of it. Mortified. So at that point, I went for 2 weeks and I stayed. And I enjoyed it. And the thing was, is I had zero interest in the sciences in EMT school. And so I walked in the funeral home with the same mindset. And for 6 years, I made a living embalming bodies. And the science part is the part that I really love about it. So that's kind of where I went. I've got a young man now that says he's going to be a nurse, and he's going to nursing school. And I'll be real surprised if he enrolls in nursing school in August instead of mortuary school. He came there, he really enjoys it. And it's either for you or it's not. Right. Like, there's no in between. I've been doing this long enough, and you either love it or you hate it. And there's some big guys that have been doing it for 40 years and they hate it, but it's all they can do. It's the only thing they're qualified to do, and they just stick it out. And I'm sure there's, that's the same in a lot of careers. But there's nothing to be ashamed about on a 2-year degree. No. I mean, I know nurses that have an associate's degree that are RNs that are knocking down $100,000 a year. I know I've tried to get my truck into her husband several times, and he was backed up for weeks at a time, and he can name his price on what he wants.
Okay, this is what I think would be my holdback on working in your business. Tell me how you overcome this obstacle. Like, I have a tender heart, and I mean, if I go to a funeral of a stranger, with my husband or something, I'm like bawling. How do you, day in, day out, every day, deal with that? Like if you're a labor delivery nurse, that's like the greatest day of someone's life. They're happy and you're happy with them. But these are like every day you're faced with families that are going through a really hard time.
How do you overcome it?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask that question.
I'm going to let you ask a question, then I'll try to answer everything. Go
ahead. Edwin, what did you?
Back to where she was going. Do you personally work with the people, or do you just like run the business of it?
That's what makes my business different than my competitor. I own the business, right, and I'm involved in every step of the way with every family. Okay. I don't know you. If your mother dies, you're going to walk in my funeral home and you're going to deal with me. Right. I know Miss Johnson. If a member of her family dies, I'm going to treat your family the same as I treat her family. That's what makes us different. I don't want to be the biggest. I want to be the best and provide the best service. Addressing what she asked and what he asked, the greatest reward for my business is for you to come up and say, thank you, it's amazing. I have a 95% satisfaction rate, and that's what I strive for. You're not going to be 100 in anything that you do. Right. You're going to have that one person that's upset that their mama died. You can't do anything to make that person happy. Right. But the way that you have to look at it is you're doing a job, you're doing a service, and it's your job to make that family's life better than when they came into your care. And we start the grief journey with every family. Right. And we have the average family for 3 to 5 days in our care, and in that amount of time we have to get them ready to go back into society and finish the grief process on their own. A lot of times they have hospice leading up to us, and then the person dies, and then they transition from hospice care to funeral care, and that's our time and our job. For instance, just this week, I'm having the funeral today. I planned a funeral for a young man that died. He's 40 years old. His father and his oldest sister came to make arrangements. Mother was too distraught, couldn't come. The younger sister is out getting his clothes and getting pictures together. She comes, we've got the funeral 70% planned, and the younger sister comes in. She's grief-stricken and undoes everything that I've worked an hour and a half to do. Very frustrating. And then she questioned me on every single thing that I was doing. Why do you need this? What are you doing with this? And all that. And I've got 2.5 hours to plan a funeral, and then we've got to keep moving. In this case, they came in on Friday. We had visitation on Sunday. We had a lot of stuff to get done, a lot of deadlines, because a lot of people don't work on the weekends. So I knew in my mind, you know, you got to stay on task. There's a certain schedule in my mind that I'm going through, certain time limits and everything, and I've just been doing it long enough that I've got to keep them on task, much like a teacher does in a classroom. You know, and they'll stray and they'll tell you stories, and you have to determine what story you want to hear and what story is not important, so that we can keep moving down the path, because we got to get from point A to point B. Long story short, there was a lot of animosity between me and the younger sister. She was angry. She'd experienced the death of her brother, and she was mad at me. And she'd ask questions. I kept telling her, you know, you don't need to worry about that. We need to worry about this. She walked into my funeral home an hour before visitation yesterday, bawling her eyes out, thanking me because everything was wonderful. And that's what makes my job worth doing. That's what, you know, spending all that extra time away from my family and all worth doing. And that's why we do what we do, is to help people. I'm lucky enough I'm able to get a check from doing that too. But you just have to, disconnect from it. And it's been hard. I mean, since I've owned my funeral home, I've buried my grandmother that raised me. I've buried a lady in Harlton that Miss Johnson, I know, that was a dear friend of mine. I've done her husband. I've done a great uncle of mine. And, you know, it's not one of those deals that you can just say, oh, here, y'all handle this. I'm too connected, you know.
Mr. Cammack, were you there when, I just went, Colton Hall, you weren't, okay. That was hard. It was there at that building before you, yeah.
Yeah, I've been out there 2.5 years.
Because like we had a student, and that was very difficult too.
The day I signed the contract to buy the funeral home, the girl that was in the band in Harlton, whose mother had died,
Lauren.
The band was there playing for her funeral while I signed the contract to buy the funeral home. That kind of puts things in.
Yeah, she was my son's grade.
So, you know, every family is different. Everybody grieves different. Everybody here, if we put, you all lost somebody, every one of you would handle it different. And so the first 10 minutes I walk into a room, I have to assess the situation and determine how I'm going to handle each individual person. I mean, there could be one person in the room, that makes it easy. There could be 5 people, and everybody you have to handle a little different, and figure out how to do it real quick. And then, you know, the biggest part of my job is not upsetting people. You know, I tell all my funeral directors, don't piss them off. And you can do it by just saying, how's your day?
They're like, well, not too great.
Yeah, we never say good morning when we talk to people, because I can assure you 50% of the people I'm dealing with aren't having a good morning.
Right.
That's just one of those things that you train yourself into doing.
Is that something you learn in mortuary school, like any kind of
They tell you not to say good morning.
Relations?
It's like everything else. You either have it or you don't. You know, the thing is, I've worked with some funeral directors that are just really fake. And you know they're really fake. You know, I'm not a hugger. I'm not going to sit there and hold your hand and console you. That's not me. I'm a pretty black and white person. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to get the job done for you. I'm going to do it the best I can. And I want you to be happy. And I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy and to help accomplish your goals for you. Some things I can't do. I mean, like, just because of what they're asking. I mean, you know, I can't fix every single problem. But you never give a family false hope. You never tell them it's going to be okay if it's not going to be okay.
Right.
And, you know, and sometimes you have to tell them things that they don't want to hear. Like, there was a man that got run over by a truck, and they wanted to see him, and they were insistent on seeing him. And I just told them, I said, I can't keep you from seeing him. That's your loved one, but I can tell you that you're going to hate me if you do see him. There's nothing I can do to fix this. You know, he got hit at 70 miles an hour. We picked up pieces, and at that point, you know, you have to get stern. You have to be authoritative, but at the same time, it's their decision. You know, there's times where you get somebody in the family, they think they have helped plan 2 funerals and they are an expert. And at that point, you have to figure out how to deal with that person. And some families you spend an hour with, some families you spend 20 hours with. You know, but there's 2 other guys on my management team, and the 3 of us kind of all speak the same language and understand, and we know different, you know, each other's strong points and weaknesses, and we try to attack the tasks that need to be attacked. Like, I've got one guy that refuses to use an iPad. I mean, and that's how I make all my funeral arrangements, is with an iPad. He refuses to use one. Not going to learn to use it. He's 42 years old, and that's that. But he runs our crematory and runs our embalming care center, and he doesn't need an iPad for that. You know, he still prints his forms off and fills them out with a blue ink pen. If I embalm, I fill out my report on my iPad and click print, and then email it to everybody that needs to. Technology is huge in my business, and it's huge in any business that you're going to go into. So I can't stress to you enough, stay on the cutting edge of that. You know, don't just get comfortable with an iPad, a cell phone, or whatever. Be willing to change and adapt, because that's what's going to help promote you in your careers. How many of you are going into the medical profession? What are you going to do? Okay. You have a 4.0? You need to work on that.
Chloe, are you planning? Maybe.
That's all.
Maybe.
Anybody over here? What are you going to do?
An RN.
Okay. Medicine is constantly changing. My stepmother's a nurse. She's been a nurse for, I don't know, since the beginning of time. And from what she started with a bachelor's, with an associate's degree, and she's been able to prove herself in the workforce and propel herself. I've got friends that have BSNs, and I guess that's kind of the average thing now. But everybody I know is back in school getting their master's and getting their nurse practitioner's degree. So stay ahead of the curve on that. You're going to be a veterinarian. What kind of veterinarian? Okay. That's the smartest thing anybody's ever said in the room today. You're going to make a lot of money, and you're going to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Grades. Anybody have a 4.0?
Is that like weighted or
Unweighted. I mean, who wants to cheat? So grades don't matter, except to get into vet school. I went through mortuary school. I never opened a book the entire time I was there. I walked into the anatomy final, anatomy 1, 2, and 3, all 3 times failing the class. And if you pass the final, you pass the class. So whatever you made on the final would take over for your class grade. And so I passed anatomy all 3 times with a low 90. Never opened a book. The dean of the college, who's now the president of the college, told me when I left that I would never make it in the funeral business. I wouldn't make it 5 years. I'd certainly never own a funeral home. And I needed to go look elsewhere for a career. And that's just because I didn't drink their Kool-Aid while I was there. I now go back to career day and talk to the students there, recruit students from there, and everything. And my whole deal is, I didn't make good grades. It wasn't because I wasn't capable of making good grades. It's because I was there to get a degree, to pass my state board, my national board examination to become a licensed funeral director. And I could do that with a C as well as I could an A, and I was working the entire time. I walked in to take my national boards 30 days after I graduated, and I made a 92. So, you know, anything you put your mind to, you can achieve. I don't ever ask anybody about their grades when I hire them, because I don't care. That's probably not something good to tell y'all as you're going into college, but that's just how I feel about it. C's get degrees, and it's about your work ethic and your determination and what you want to do.
Tell them a little bit more about the importance of building relationships.
Relationships are huge, and when I say huge, they're huge. That's how I'm standing here today. I like to come talk to students, and I met Miss Johns at Harleston High School, and we've been friends ever since. She taught my sister before we ever met. Relationships are huge. I wish that when I was sitting where you are, that I knew I was going to be in the funeral business, and I'd have been a lot more active in the community than what I was at that age. Because all the different student boards and all, I had no interest in that because I was showing and training horses. About my relationships in the community, I through luck, the Gregg County Sheriff and I are best friends, and Judge Tim Bryan, who's going to come speak, is one of my best friends, and they've kind of taken me under their wing and taken me to events and introduced me to people, and maybe people I knew their names, knew their faces, didn't know them at all. And so the cool thing about the relationships that I've made with them, they've broadened my horizons and all, and how I know people and associate with them. But the other day I called, and we were going to a crawfish bowl for the Harvest Festival, and I called and I told the lady I needed a table, and I said, I'd like to get a VIP table because you get in early, you don't have to stand in line. She said, I'm full, can't get one. And I said, well, I'm bringing the district attorney and I'm bringing the sheriff with me. And she said, well, absolutely, we'd love to get you a VIP table. And so then I went to the Longview ISD Foundation dinner the other night, and you have to fill out when you go to all these banquets and all, fill out who's sitting with you and all. And so I put the sheriff's name down, and I put the district attorney's name down, and everything like that. And they had me sitting right up front in the center. I had the best spot. We got our dinner first, everything like that. So, you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know in those kind of situations. But in my line of work, relationships are everything, because you never know. I mean, everybody here is healthy. Everybody here probably doesn't have a need for a funeral home. I can see you next week. I can see you 20 years from now. You never know who's going to walk in your door. You know, I've gotten several phone calls in the middle of the night and just completely shocked that somebody, you know, has died. But the relationships that you build, your word and being honest is huge. The way I bought my funeral home, my banker was my classmate from Judson Middle School up till I left Longview High School, John Cromer. And we weren't real good friends, but I was always respectful of him growing up. And he was in the band, I wasn't, but I was very respectful. I was very cordial. When he got in the banking business, I reestablished a relationship with him, ran into him. Man, I know him, I like him, I think I'm gonna do business with him. I bought my funeral home. They never looked at my tax returns, but I bought it on a handshake, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had it not been for that relationship and him standing behind me and giving that nod. In the funeral home, I've grown my business 10%. I hadn't grown my business 10% because I'm a magician. I've grown my business because of the relationships that I've cultivated in town with people and interacted with and everything like that. Any
We
more
have
questions?
about, what, 2 minutes?
1 minute.
1 minute? Anybody else have a quick question?
Yeah. The line back delivery, you say you're on call 24/7, 7 days a week?
I'm on call all the time.
So whenever
My
you-
guys are on call every other weekend. My funeral directors take call. And we have a night crew, so they're not on call, but I answer the phone.